Hello, everyone. We got more people coming in. Hello. Happy Tuesday. Hi, Catherine. Some familiar faces. Hi, everyone. Welcome to CMC Sessions. How's everyone doing tonight? Feel free to comment in the chat. We got a thumbs up. Hi, Anne. Hello, hello. Well, I think we can go ahead and get started. We want to do this introduction as fast as possible so we can have Erik do his presentation. Thank you, Erik, for being here today. Hi, Erik.
Hey.
Okie dokie. So I just want to get started with, I'll introduce myself a little bit here. I am Chantel Hernandez, for those of you who I haven't met yet. I am the Community Music Center's program coordinator, and I am so excited to be here with you tonight. I want to thank Trevor Otten, CMC Cultural Traditions Department Faculty Chair. Thank you, Trevor, for his coordination of the artist workshops in this series, and also our special guest, Erik Pearson. Community Music Center wishes to respectfully acknowledge that our organization sits on the ancestral and unceded homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula and who are still living here today. We make this acknowledgement to create greater public consciousness of Native sovereignty and cultural rights as a step towards equitable relationships and reconciliation. Also, please note that tonight's workshop will be recorded for documentation purposes. If you wish to avoid the possibility of your image being recorded, please turn your camera off upon entry. Throughout the evening, we will be adding to the chat various ways to continue your musical journey with info about opportunities at Community Music Center. We have opportunities for free trial lessons, discounts, and other free workshops. If you have any questions at all, again, please put your comments in the chat and we will be sure to address them at the end of our session during our Q&A. Our spring quarter at Community Music Center is in full swing. We have a great offer on 5 music lessons for the price of 4 plus 30% off. And you need to register by May 7th to get this deal. So that's coming up. And to learn more about this, I'm just going to post in the chat really quick. You can check out this link. There you go. Now, please join me in welcoming CMC faculty member Trevor Otten, who teaches violin in our Mission District Young Musicians program and in the SFUSD Mariachi program. He also teaches Cuban music classes that I will link in the chat as well. And Trevor will now share an overview of the series and introduce our artist. Thank you, Trevor.
All right, thank you, Chantel. Oh, and just to let you know, my wife was just saying maybe there's some people that can't get on. I don't know, she couldn't get on. It says waiting for host. Oh, she said thank you. All right, I'm Traeger. I am the chair of the Cultural Traditions Department at Community Music Center. I've been working at Music Center for like 20 years or more. And I love the Music Center. I see a couple of my students here. Hey, Harriet. And it's great to see Thor, too, from Alabama Jamma. Me and Erik have been working together for a bunch of years. We've had some fun gigs together, especially a lot of stuff at the Music Center. And he's an amazing musician, and I have great respect for him. I'm really looking forward to what he's going to do, but I won't talk too much about that because you're going to hear him in a second. I just want to tell you a little about this series. We've been doing this series, which came through a grant, a partnership grant in the Community Center Music Center gave me, and so we're able to highlight faculty from the music center and from the cultural traditions department. And I've just been so not flabbergasted because I have high expectations, but every presentation I see a lot of you have been here for some of the others. They've been great. It's just wonderful to learn about our fantastic faculty that we have and to hear their take on the music that they teach, basically. Um, Also, of course, Erik's a teacher. If anybody ever wants to take, we've been trying to do a group old time music class together, me and Erik, for a while. So I'm going to do a little plug for that. We haven't had enough. We only need like 2 people for the group class, but we haven't had enough yet. But it's just, well, COVID, everything's happening. But I just want to say thank you, Erik, and thank you, Community Music Center, Chantel, and Sylvia, too, for facilitating this. And Erik, I want to hear what you got to say, my friend.
Great. Here I am. It turns out, thanks Traeger and thanks Chantal. Turns out, I guess Traeger and my family go back 400 years. We figured that out in a conversation at some point. That's another story. Today we're here to talk about the banjo. And I'm Erik Pearson. I just, that was a nice introduction. And so I'm going to start telling you a little bit about my own banjo playing by just playing a few tunes, and so you can get in the spirit of the whole thing. Here we go. Come on home, Cindy, Cindy. Come on home, Cindy, Cindy. Come on home. Come on home, Cindy, Cindy. Fall on my knees for you. All right. So that was fun. So those three tunes that I played were all tunes that I were some of the first tunes that I heard or learned when I started playing old time music and when I first started playing the banjo. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey into the banjo because I was not born with it, as you might say. Like some people grow up with the banjo. Some people they learn it from their grandparents, they learn it from their parents, their aunts and the uncles, and it's just around them. That isn't the case for me. I learned the banjo first. I'd heard banjo music growing up, you know, like bluegrass and stuff like that. It was around and I saw some festivals and stuff, but it wasn't something that was in my family or even that close to me. But the first way that I heard old time music or what I was playing there is old time music. The first time I heard that was in college. I was in music school and I was sitting there in the not in the cafeteria, in the co-op where uh, we had after dinner one day, and I heard all these great fiddle tunes coming down from the stairwell. And I just sat there listening. And then at some point, like I was thinking about something else, and I realized, oh, that's people playing that music. I better go see what's going on. I was really enjoying it. And I walked up the stairs, and lo and behold, it was three of my good friends playing. And I didn't even really know that they played this music. And I said, can I sit and listen there? And they said, listen, go get your guitar. Come on, let's. And so from that moment on, we just played together as much as possible. And so what it was a fiddle, a banjo, and then two guitars. And I sort of learned that what we were doing was, it sort of sounded like bluegrass to me, but what I learned it was very quickly was old time music. And what is old time music? That's a good question. One of the things that fascinated me about the old time music was the banjo style. Um, the banjo style that I was used to was the Earl Scruggs method, which is like it's like finger picking on the guitar, like that, where you sort of wear finger picks on your and you pick it like a guitar. But this style was a strange, I couldn't figure out what was going on for the longest time. In fact, I would sit, the guy who showed it to me was a friend of mine named Adam Yarmy, who actually lives down in Santa Cruz. He's a fabulous banjo player. And I would sit like right with my head right next to the banjo and watch his right hand because I could not tell what he was doing. It's hard to tell, but what you're doing, and this style I learned was called clawhammer banjo. And what you're doing is you're actually hitting down with your nail on the strings. So which is different from guitar style, which is like this, right? So, and then you're using your thumb. And it was different from the Pete Seeger way that I was also accustomed to hearing and listening. One of the things that was so crazy about it is that it sounded like there are so many more notes coming than than how much you were hitting the strings. And so what I learned then is that it's actually sort of a polyrhythm that happens between your two hands. So you're sliding and hammering on and doing things with your left hand in time with a rhythm that you're doing with your right hand. Things like this. There's the craziest thing, but I was fascinated and I was hooked. And some of the first music that I heard, I guess I'll say first what old time music is it's really a regional music. What I learned is that banjo music comes from different places. There's a certain way they play the banjo in Western North Carolina. There's a certain kind of in West Virginia. There's a certain kind in Kentucky. And the kind that I had heard first and was learning from was a kind that came from southwestern Virginia and from northwestern North Carolina. And they call that round peak style. And there are some different banjo players who play that style. And I'm going to show you some. The first person I was exposed to was somebody named Tommy Jarrell. And I'll show you some, I'll share with you a video of.
Erik?
Yes?
I'm sorry I just wanted to jump in really fast. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm really enjoying this, man. It's awesome.
No problem.
I just wanted to say, we forgot to say at the beginning that if anybody wants to put any questions into the chat, you're welcome to do that as the presentation goes. So please feel free to do that. We may be able to answer something within if I rudely interrupt Erik again, or we can talk about it at the end. Okay, thank you.
Great. So because my title here, An Incomplete History of the Banjo, because banjo history is really varied because of all these regional styles and because of the long history, there's so much to talk about. The thing that I know the best is the clawhammer banjo. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about that for a second, and then we're going to go back and figure out some stuff about where that happened, where that came from. So here's the first guy that I ever heard. His name's Tommy Jarrell, and he's playing some clawhammer banjo. So we'll take a look at this.
I'm gone, what the train I call on, I'm 900 miles away from home. 900 miles with my wife and my child, a wee child was 900 bones.
So Tommy Jarrell is actually more known as a fiddle player. And so here's some of his fiddling with somebody named Fred Cockerham, who he played a lot with.
All right, Fred, just play a little of Breaking Up Christmas.
Great. Some things maybe you noticed. One of the things is no frets on those banjos. They There's some old stories where back in the days when you could order catalog banjos, people would order the banjos and they'd come and they'd have these frets on the neck, and people would say, "What are those things?" I don't need those when nobody around here plays with them. They grab them with a pair of pliers and pull them off. Um, but you can see that he's playing clawhammer banjo on a fretless neck. So that was my introduction to old time music, and I just got really into it. It's such great music. To me at the beginning of it, it sounds much rawer than say bluegrass music. It's more screechy, but if as you start to listen to it, you start to hear this rhythmic pulse of the fiddle and the slidiness of the fretless banjo. It's just, to me, quite infectious. And so that was a tunnel that I went down, and I still am in that tunnel 30 years later. So maybe I'm never getting out of there. Um, but so that was my introduction to the banjo and to clawhammer banjo. And the more I got into it, the more I saw how many styles there were. There's the three finger style that I mentioned. There's clawhammer, which is also called frailing or knocking or rapping on the banjo. There's different words for that. Sometimes some people call it flailing too. That's another thing. There's another style called two finger, which is sort of like guitar style a little bit. It's a little bit like blues guitar playing, like country blues guitar playing. There's a style called classical. I have a video that I'll show you some later that's kind of plays a lot of ragtime music. And then there are regional styles in North Carolina, in Eastern Kentucky that go way back, way back. So I can't talk about all of those. I'm going to mostly focus on clawhammer, and you'll understand why in a little bit. So most of banjo music really is, like I said, it's this regional music. It's folk music that has been passed down for through families. There have been all sorts of studies that have basically documented the folk roots of banjo music and in different areas, and music probably in lots of traditions clusters around different families, and for obvious reasons, because children learn it from their parents, they learn it from their grandparents. If the music's around, people get thrilled by it and they want to go learn it. And so you can follow music down these legacies of individuals, and which is very different in the folk world than it is, say, we're buying a method book for a guitar lessons or something, or that's a completely different type of tradition, or people learn stuff because they think it's cool, like the way I learned rock and roll, right? Everybody was playing guitar. We were all playing Neil Young songs, and that was just the Led Zeppelin. It was the thing to do. It was not centered around a family. It was centered around what was popular. And there are strains of that in the banjo as well. And so, but the thing that I'm most interested in is that folk strain, the one that gets passed down through people, kind of, more or less a certain way. And anyway, so let's see. So that's kind of like that old time music. That is where it got passed down. But how far and from where? That's sort of the big question, that kind of came into my mind when the more I learned about this kind of stuff. And So, one way that history looks at things is through documents. What is the documents that are available? So, the earliest document that of that literally transcribes banjo music is this book. It's called the Briggs Banjo Instructor, and it was published in 1855, and it's the very first one. And what's kind of notable about it, aside from some of the tunes that mostly a lot of the tunes people don't play that much anymore, but there are a few tunes that people play in it. But it's what they call, it's taught in what they call the stroke style, which is essentially clawhammer. It's the down picking style with the thumb. And so, which that's really interesting. So that documents that as being the oldest banjo style that has been, at least written down in 1855. But so where did it come from? Where did the banjo come from? It actually came from Africa, and it came both in the minds of the people who were enslaved and brought over here, and in the traditions, and it pretty much as soon as it hit some of the earliest spots, the Caribbean for one, it started changing and melding with different cultures. And a lot of the pieces of the puzzle of how that all worked have not been really figured out until recently. And it's still going on. We're still discovering all sorts of things. I'm not a historian, but I am a fan. I'm a fanboy of banjo history. And so I kind of love to read all of this stuff. There are some really great books, but a lot of them are fairly recent. Like the oldest book exploring this is this one by Dina Epstein. It's called Sinful Tunes and Spirituals, Black Folk Music to the Civil War. And that was the first one that started really trying to identify the African roots of the banjo. And there's another one from Cecilia Conway called African Banjo Echoes in Appalachia. That was the first one I got. That was from 1995. Anyway, it's kind of interesting to, like, now's a great time for banjo history, because history itself all around of our country is being sort of re-examined in these really great ways, where say the Confederate statues that people set up back in the early 1900 or early I guess it was there, I don't know when they did, but post Reconstruction and stuff, to try and create a history that didn't exactly exist. That happened in the banjo too. There was a guy a white musician named Joel Walker Sweeney, who for many years he played banjo in the 1830s. He was one of the first sort of white musicians to get popular playing the banjo. And so he was given credit for sort of inventing the 5-string banjo by presumably people who wanted to shape the narrative of the banjo as being a white instrument. And so it's great to be able to knock down those Confederate statues and to really deliver the reality, because the truth is, the evidence is there, and it's just, yeah, all you have to do is scratch the surface and you can see the truth of the history, and dispense with all that. So let's go back to some of the the earliest things. I have some images and some stories to tell about. So some of the very first references for the banjo, the first one that anybody can find so far was from 1736. It was from a letter that somebody wrote in New York City about a Pentecost celebration where people were playing the banjo. And the way they talked about it in the letter, it was they mentioned the banjo just in passing, so it's clear that the banjo was not a new thing, and it was something that everybody knew and associated with celebration and maybe some some religious stuff. There's also some mentions in 1740s and 50s as far west as Kentucky of actually a white guy named James Holliday playing the banjo. So it goes way, way, way back. So let's look at some of these some images from the past here. That's right. Let's before we do that, let's listen to these. These are some pieces from the Briggs Banjo Instructor, from that old 1855 book that I mentioned. So this one's called The Circus Jig, and it's played by Rhiannon Giddens and Hubby Jenkins.
Yeah.
And here's another one called The Corn Shucking Jig, played by Timothy Twist.
Briggs Corn Shucking Jig.
Great. So that's you can see that's almost it's not exactly the same as clawhammer, but it's the same style, and it's very similar to clawhammer. So you can see that like that there's almost a straight line back to at least the methodology, if not the music, in that 1855 book. So one of my favorite and most mind-blowing kind of things that I've learned in that is there was a guy named Lemuahuma Jata who he was a student from Gambia, and he came and studied in South Carolina in the 1970s. And while he was there, there was a visiting band from Tennessee who was playing some music, and he heard the banjo, and he said, "What?" He said to his friend next to him, he said, "What is that? That sounds really familiar." And he was really enjoying it. And he was like, "Well, that's the banjo." He said, "Huh, that's interesting. My dad plays one of those." That, and so that instrument, and so he got fascinated by the banjo, and it became a hobby, and the more he thought about it and compared his own culture from Gambia to what he saw as the banjo culture, he was like, there's the playing style is the same. There's so much about the construction and history of the region that he grew up in that has a relationship. And so he became really convinced that that was where the banjo came from. And it was and the instrument that he was talking about is called the akanting. And it's from Senegal, Gambia, West Africa there. Burkina Faso, I guess, is the other place. Is that right? Anyway. So this is what it looks like. And you can tell it looks just like a banjo. It's got the high string on the top. And the thing that blew my mind really is that it's played in the exact same way, with the down picking style and the thumb. Pretty amazing, right? It's got a skin, the neck goes all the way through the body, and it's made with a gourd with some decorations, and the some floating bridge. It's incredible. So he started making these arguments that the akanting was the ancestor of the banjo, or it's hard to say. Yeah, I guess ancestor is the right word. So let me show you some akanting in action here. Oh, first, before we do that, right, let me show here these pictures here. This is the earliest photograph, or not a photograph, but painting that depicts the banjo here. And it's called the Old Plantation. It was painted sometime in the 1780s. And you can see what's going on. It's a party, people are dancing. And over on the right-hand corner, you can see the banjo. It's made out of a gourd, and it's got a few strings, and there's somebody next to him playing playing some drums. And here's the close-up picture of it. You can see, look, it's a gourd, it's decorated. It's got the high string on the top and 3 melodic strings. You can see the thumb and the hand position. And then you can also see the guy next to him playing the drums. It's sort of amazing when you see when you see the akanting next to that picture. You can see, oh yeah, those things are very similar. And this slide here shows some of the earliest depictions of instruments that were found, that were seen in the Caribbean. And you can see there, it's not quite the akanting, but they look very similar to that picture from the Old Plantation. The gourd with the strings and the high string, and then the one on the right is it's got the little tuners up there. And here's another, this one's called a Pondja, and this was also from the Caribbean. So you can see it's the same 3 strings up there with the short string. I think it's either a left-handed instrument or the picture is reversed, but it's the same idea that the stick goes through the gourd with the string, and it's missing the bridge. But anyway, you can see the similarity. So here's actually some contemporary akanting playing. And this is Lemuahuma's cousin, I think, Ikona Jata, playing on the akanting. So check it out.
Yeah.
Here's some with drums and dancing and electric. It's electrified, so it's pretty rocking. And here's some dancing with Akona playing again at night. It's pretty cool. So yeah, so it's cool. It feels like a real through line for me being a clawhammer player to watch people play music. The music's different, of course, but it's not that different. It's it feels like two beautiful pieces were put together, and to create the history here. And so what happened when the banjo came over here is of course there's so many cultures that mix together here in the early Americas. There's the native cultures there, there's in the early pictures with Tommy Jarrell and Fred Cockerham, we associate the banjo with the fiddle a lot, and those two things came together. The Scottish people from who were mostly settlers of Ireland brought their fiddle tradition over, and up to the Appalachian region, and so the fiddle and the banjo mixed together. And of course, there's all these, cultures from West Africa that brought their traditions as well. So in English music, German stuff, there's so many different blends of things that came together to create the music that we associate with the banjo now. But to reach back and see the direct lineage, especially with clawhammer, I think there are bluegrass players who are who maybe don't feel that same thing, because but yeah, there's so many roots. So basically what happened after that Briggs banjo instructor, the banjo kind of took off, and it went in many different directions in the mid 1800s. It got really popular because, partially because there are all these traveling musicians in these minstrel shows. There was just, how things get popular. This is kind of that divide between the folk tradition, like what I might consider the real tradition, and then popularization that that sort of creates new opportunities. And of course, a lot of those new opportunities turned into something. So, the banjo, the next couple of pretty quickly after the Briggs banjo instructor, there are two other um, instructors, banjo instructors, that started showing guitar, what they called guitar style. And the guitar style banjo led to all sorts of things. There was ragtime music that got around the early 1900s, maybe late 1800s. Like Scott Joplin was actually a banjo player as well as a piano player and a composer. He's mostly known for his piano stuff, but apparently he was a great banjo player too. And so a lot of that music, and then plectrum banjo became the instrument in jazz music before there was guitar and stuff like that. And there was banjo orchestras in the early 1900s. There was all these string bands that played the fiddle and banjo music. There's just ragtime music. So it kind of went in all these different directions. And the things that we see today, like bluegrass music and stuff, they sort of are reimaginings. And the good thing about today, I have a couple of more slides to show you, and with some of these other banjo styles. But the good thing about today is that things like when I was a kid, it was all about bluegrass and Earl Scruggs, and that was like the banjo in people's minds. But there's been, I think, as a result of some of this history that's being unearthed and pieced together, there's been a huge resurgence of different styles. There's classic banjo players. People are learning classic banjo playing again. That was sort of almost dying out. I'll show you a slide of that in a second. There was, people are still doing, yes, New Orleans jazz is another, banjo was a huge part of jazz music before the guitar got involved. It's Irish music. There's a lot of actually African American reclamation of the banjo, both from its origins and also scholarship, interviewing people to discover, to be able to learn the tradition again. And like Rhiannon Giddens, who was in one of those previous slides, was part of a band called the Carolina Chocolate Drops that did great work. They met up with a lot of old players and learned tunes from them, and are really picked up the tradition. And then there's also a lot of going out into these multiple fiddle traditions that exist around the world. There's collaborations with Swedish musicians. There's collaborations with Celtic musicians and Chinese erhu players, and as well as this and a very deep, intense African collaboration with African musicians. So it's a very exciting time to be getting into the banjo. So I'm going to just show a couple more slides and then we can do some Q&A. So here's once again that Old Plantation picture here. And let's see. Here's an old picture of a banjo ensemble. You can see that not only were the styles spreading out in the early 1900s, but the types of instruments. People made bass banjos and pony banjos and little tiny banjarines and stuff. And then there were these banjo orchestras here. So here's what you might call classic banjo. This is a really great player named Clark Bueling, and this Tom Marion playing guitar.
Ground speed. Oh yeah.
And here's a little Earl Scruggs for you. So you can really see how why people like Earl Scruggs. Anyway, that so yeah, it's a very exciting time to play play the banjo. So before we do a couple of answer some questions, I want to just play a couple quick tunes for you. Do better tune. This is an old banjo from the 1880s that I revamped during the pandemic here. Well, cuckoo, she's a pretty bird, and she warbles, and she flies, and she never house cuckoo till 4th day of July. When I played cards in England, and I played cards in Spain, and I'll bet you $20 that I'll beat you next game. Jack Diamonds, I know you from old. You robbed me, my pockets of silver and gold. All right, so maybe we'll wrap it up with that and answer a few questions. So maybe you can unmute yourself. I see a lot of comments in the chats there. So
That was awesome, Eric.
No, it's all down. I mean, I guess you could call. I saw an "Are you picking up?" No, it's all down. Picking. I guess if anybody has a question, they could raise their hand here. Maybe we'll put on.
Someone is also asking the difference between 4 and 5 string banjo.
Oh yeah, good question. Well, 5-string banjo is sort of 4-string banjo is missing the characteristic string of the banjo, which is the high string on the top. So 4-string is basically just the 4 melodic strings, and often you play it with a pick like a guitar. So that's often used in like jazz or sometimes Irish music. And they use a plectrum, a guitar pick with it.
Okay.
Isn't the 4-string tuning different than the 5?
Oh yeah. There's different tunings for all of them, but there's several different 4-string tunings. One of them is just like a viola, I think, maybe tuned in fifths. And then there's another tuning that's, some people tune it like a guitar. And then there's another actually specific 4th-string tuning as well. And the 5-string banjo, with old time music, there's all sorts of different tunings. Like, I think there's about 6 or 7 tunings that are really common.
6 or 7. Yeah, there's only 12 keys. But also, a lot of people were asking Eric about tunings and about the African tunings. I assume that there's just a million different tunings.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know enough of that.
Now, Brad also wanted to ask a question, and well,
this is how the accounting is tuned. And if you see different accounting, I mean, there's different tunings for the accounting too. But this was one that I learned, and I have to say, the accounting, it's fishing line, and it's tied on here, and it never goes out of tune. All my banjos go out of tune way more often than this does. So, kind of amazing. I don't know. That's just an anecdote there, but
interesting question. I thought about when did so the banjo came into the America or North America, let's say, from folks from Africa. And when did it start becoming popular among non-African Americans? And I would also like to add, what was that early? I mean, you can't answer this, but what was the early music like?
I wish. I mean, some of the descriptions, like in that painting, the Old Plantation, you have the banjo and the drum. You don't see any fiddles, although fiddles were really very popular instrument. There were a lot of black fiddlers in the way back, from the very beginning. In fact, there's probably, well, I don't know. There's some evidence that more people played fiddle than they played banjo. But what was the music like? I have no idea. I really wish I did. That I think in the early days, the banjo was played with drums, and then I think the fiddle crept in as more, as that tradition became more prevalent in the people who are living here, in the States. And yeah, and so for, like I said about Joel Walker Sweeney, I think he's often given credit for sort of like being the Elvis in a way of like popularizing banjo among white people, but that's nonsense. There was like I said, there was evidence of in Eastern Kentucky of white banjo players like many years before that, 1750s. And of course, the people in Kentucky, they all came from Virginia and North Carolina. So they brought it with them. So that must have been before that, may have been even as early as the 1600s that, you know, that, that so um, yeah, let's see. I'm reading some of those, and you can't discount also there's a lot of Native American influence as well in old time music. Certainly with the dance, with square dancing and clogging and stuff like that. There's that, and singing styles and yeah, there's it's all in there. Let's see, mixture of yeah, was it a mixture of influences? Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. That, I think um and I think what we're what we learn, you know, is that as we're getting more and more into uncovering all, peeling back the layers of the onion, so to speak, like, is that people were influenced by each other. They loved each other's cultures. They were interested. There you know there was a lot of negative stuff, of course, and a lot of appropriation and uh and the way society was structured and stuff. But there was also, like, musicians love music, that you can't get away from that. And it's true now, and it was true then, that we're going to go after and find the stuff that's cool and, like, learn it and meet those people who are playing it. And so I think that stretches all the way back. Um, even when people were just had much different attitudes and much different sort of predispositions or cultural, whatever you want to call it. Let's see.
Cultural biases or something.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of walls, ways that border, boundaries on how you could interact and stuff like that. But it was my understanding that, like, actually Joel Walker Sweeney, I mean, he learned the banjo from the people. I think he worked on a plantation, and so he learned it from the enslaved people on the plantation. But it was my understanding that his one of his first traveling bands was mixed race, so that it was, and and then it got harder to have those um, integrated bands with it, because of as it got closer to the Civil War, because of things like the fugitive slave law. It was just super dangerous for free black people to travel, because they could be swept up and sold into slavery. It was horrifying. So um, so that was a factor, I think, in traveling musicians back in those days. um, but let's see some other good question. You can feel free to raise your hands too. Ooh, a harmonica orchestra in Utah. That's awesome.
That was my mom's dad. Mom's here. Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, there were mandolin orchestras. I think there was a lot of these kind of banjo orchestras, mandolin orchestras. Um,
I would like to jump in really quick. I had mentioned in the chat, and I know Sylvia did as well. But Erik will be part of a special songwriting event, and it'll be next Thursday. I know that we want to, a couple people requested Erik to keep playing. You'll be able to get to hear him play a little bit more. And that'll be next Thursday, May 6th. And it's the Songwriters in the Square, a Zoom concert with CMC Songwriters, hosted by guitar and songwriting faculty Larry Dunn, with performances by Erik Pearson, Maestro Curtis, and Ann Cara Mitchell. And I will post again the RSVP link.
And in 2 weeks from tonight, we're going to have a presentation on gypsy jazz from Scott Fichter. I hope I pronounced his name right. I'm horrible with pronouncing names right, but Scott Fichter, and he's going to be talking about gypsy jazz. It's in 2 weeks, so be an interesting presentation. He's another faculty member. I just thought I'd let you know about that. 2 weeks from today.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming today, and thank you so much, Erik, for.
Thank you, Erik.
Hey,
Thank you all. Thanks you all for being here and for listening. And I hope that this will just make your get you inspired to learn more about the banjo and to dig more into the real history of things. You know, to uncover all the layers that are part of. Because it's way more interesting than learning who won the wars.
It was amazing. Thank you so much. You are a font of information.
Thank you. It was hard to whittle it down, let me tell you.
Good playing also, Erik.
Oh, thank
Love
you.
it.
All right. Well, thank you everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Chantal.
Thanks, everybody. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.